Good afternoon, everybody. We're a bit more live after the previous hour. Not because if you were in next door listening to us talk, it won't be because of that, but more the sense of just the afternoon's back into the swing, right? We've had to walk around a little bit. It's all good. So, Katie, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure. I'm Katie Piccirilli. I'm Director of Product Marketing in the Ansible business unit. I've been part of the Ansible team in Red Hat for 7 years.
Yep. And Richard Henshaw, so I head up product management for the ABU and Ansible. So I have to apologize for everything we get wrong, but if you ever see Matt Jones walking around, he's the one with the big beard. You saw him yesterday on the screen. He's the one that's actually responsible for everything that is wrong with the product, so he's the one you should go and talk to. So, but I'm going to make more fun of him later, so therefore I'm just getting started early.
We're not going to make fun of him later.
I am making fun of Matt later,
Okay.
but in a good way, in a good way.
You'll be very impressed.
Yes. So we're going to talk about ops as code. So I did this for 8 minutes and 13 seconds yesterday, which seemed to go by in a blink of an eye, and I was suddenly like, oh shit, it's ending. What do I do now? There we go. But we want to talk about ops as code, and then before, if I'm here, right, that topic. If you're next door, I apologize, I'm going to make this short. We always usually start with this slide, mostly for the purpose of explaining what it is we are trying to do with the product. So very briefly, I want to remove repetitive tasks, help teams collaborate, work within the fact that we have different operating models, different team structures, make sure we can focus on actually delivering the outcome of automation. And the reason why that context is important is when we talk about ops as code and we talk about the modernization of how we do operational management, it's no different when we talk about ops than what it was when we started talking about build and provisioning and configuration of app servers and infrastructure. It's the same principles being applied, just to a different group, right? That's going to be the theme of what we're going to talk about a bit more now. And when we also talk about automation in the concept of why you're automating, whose focus on automation is to optimize their own work? Right. Whose focus is to transform how the organization works? Right. About half-half, right? Maybe 60-40. Point is, it should be both. It's not an or question. That's a slight trick, right? It's not optimize or transform, it's optimize and transform, right? And the reason why it's optimize and transform is you, one, need to be able to optimize for yourself to save yourself time so you can focus on fixing other things. But you also need to transform because we need to make things better, right? We're trying to change something. And when we do that transformation, we need to adjust how we work to get to the state we want to get to. And by doing those two things together, you both help yourself and you help the people that avail themselves of your services, right? So, again, think of that as a concept. You want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So when we talk to our customers and potential customers and just users and community members, when we think about what they're trying to solve for, there's kind of 3 key areas that kind of come in that we have some challenges with that you're trying to figure out. First of all is, innovation. If you're doing all the same things over and over again, you're not focused on the things that are going to help you change and innovate. How do we do it faster, better, quicker, more efficient? And then finally, how does the team going to actually deliver on this? I was actually talking to a customer this morning, and they're super happy with everything, except they're not happy with everyone around them that won't use Ansible or, kind of join the party. I bet you've experienced that yourself. And so we're trying to figure out how to help you with this solution, and as we walk through thinking about what ops as code can do, you're going to be able to kind of hopefully tackle some of these challenges. One.
Yes, I'm trying to remember the first line of this slide.
I know.
Right, so.
You're the one who made this build here.
I know. Actually, no, I didn't make this build. This is one of the things, I hate build slides, although I have used 3 of them after this. But normally, because as what one of my team say to me, goes, you never respect the build-up of a slide when I'm doing presentations. So I'm not going to jump to the end of it. But the next wave of automation. Now, why do we call it the next wave of automation? If I think about infrastructure as code, right, and that concept of build and provisioning, we've been trying to do this for 15, 20 years. The last 10 years, there's really been a movement around it. An IAC is a method that most people should be familiar with. But I always say it this way, it's a solved problem. You can go and search online. You can find 100 different examples of how infrastructure code is being completed by an organization that wants to explain it to you. It's really a question of political will, investment, how much money have you got, and do you have the skill sets, right? And depending on how strong each of those 3 areas are, you may do it in a year or 2 or 10, right? Depending on how, or you may still be on that journey, right? But it is a solved problem. There are many ways to actually do it. Yet the same principle is we haven't actually thought about what comes after that a lot of the time. And so we often get these questions. Can I extend my automation beyond day 0 and day 1? These are genuine questions that come when we have executive briefing centers, when we have customer meetings. You may think and go, well, yeah, of course you can. Can I also use automation for the time it takes between identifying a problem and fixing it? Maybe, yeah, I suppose. Why not? Should I put automation and the capability, and this is obviously a slightly long-winded, this is not a real worded question, and nobody had asked the question that way. Should I put automation and the capabilities it allows in the hands of as many users as possible in order to maximize the benefits of the entire organization? What did Katie say earlier? Every conversation I'm having while I'm here at Summit involves, I really love Ansible, I really love automation, but I can't get these other teams or these other people to invest in the same vision I've got of what I can achieve, right? Should I do that? Well, yes, of course, we should do all of those things, right? And the problem is we see people continually falling at that last hurdle, right? We're doing all this work, we're taking all these lessons, doing all these steps, and then we just suddenly stop, right? Now, the thing is, you may be thinking in the room, go, no, I didn't stop, I carried on going. Great, right? You're the person that can, right? You're the person that is doing. It's the others. And the one thing that sort of really, sorry, I've got this slide. The one thing that really makes a difference is when we think about operations, it's an area we tend to not like investing in, right? Nah, leave those guys over there. They just respond to the tickets and the incidents that pop up, right? But we're changing that. We need to change that, right? Because that we've got something that can help. We've got something that we want to be able to apply to that can help. But we need to figure out why. So we are going to go into the strategy. I'll let you have that for the next 4 because you want to do those ones.
So some of the things that we talk about, and I've spoken about this a number of times in a couple of different places, but the reality is that vision and strategy matter. Oftentimes, over the past few years, even when we talk to customers, there's always been like maybe a person or a team, right, that has started automating because maybe you got more on your plate than you can handle and you've got to be able to do something. But at the end of the day, in order to get all those teams around you to rally, vision and strategy matter. And this is where not only leaders come in, but all of you, right? If you're bought into it, it really can make a difference. So there's 3 areas that we really always talk to our customers about, are like, how do we do this, right? You can do one thing and your team can do one thing well, but if you want to be able to spread that across different areas, you have to think like software developers do. We're talking about ops as code, right? We have to think like software developers do. We need to use Git repositories and build that culture of modern development, even in other areas of the business. Have an automation-first cultural mindset. If you have a new project or something you're trying to build, don't just build it, think about how you can automate it first, right? If the organization comes together with that automation-first mindset, you can actually move the ball a little bit further down the field. And last but not least, and I'm going to touch a little bit on this, is we have to leverage and share the skills and experiences of others, building a center of excellence or community of practice, right? You have to be able to share the skills and experiences and fill that talent gap. One of the things that we talked about and we announced is Ansible Lightspeed with IBM Watson Code Assistant. And that ideally is going to help kind of shorten the time to value to being able to build automation and hopefully fill in some of those gaps that will exist that you may not have a full team to be able to deliver on. There's an example of a financial services customer that we talk about quite a bit, and they had a new CIO come in, and basically they sat down on the team and they said, we're going to build extreme automation into our organization. If you can automate it, it will get funded in some way, whether it's resources or tools, et cetera. And the mission was something everyone rallied around. They built new ways of doing their development. They built added the skills, they helped the teams get the skills that they needed, and built that automation first mindset. And their ability to move to win with what they're doing was unbelievable. Like one of the customers that we've seen the most.
You always find extreme examples. You talk to enough customers, you find enough commonality across. Everybody in this room probably has like 80% of the same challenges and problems, and it's those 20% that are different. And then you talk to that one customer who's just like gone really, I love it, I want to do it, everything, and they just go for it, and that's this customer. And then you have the other flip side of the customer that I was at a couple of months ago, and they were like, the guy who's leading the automation thing is like, I just can't get anybody to do anything. You got a common story. He goes, yeah, they just love logging onto boxes and fixing them manually. Right. He goes, they literally take pride in being able to do it. It's the thing. They don't believe in automation because they believe they can do it better by hand. And I'm just going, okay, fair enough. Right. So I always say, never underestimate people's personal motivations as an inhibitor or as, to what you want to try and achieve. And this is a good example where everybody is bought in. It is the mantra of that team, of that department, that organization. They all get it. They all go for it. But they're the oddity, right? But you should all be moving towards that. So.
And I'll tell you, those 3 pieces of strategy that we laid out, those have all come from customers who have done it well. And the think like a software developer came from a team of network engineers.
I think, so when you think about why those 3 things, and we sort of think, why ops as code and why now? Well, as I said earlier, we've done a lot of this elsewhere, right? Those are the lessons learned. The next opportunity, the next place to gain that efficiency. I said this yesterday. Where is Ansible going to help with the next set of opportunities for efficiency that you can gain? And like we say, we see ops not being something that's invested in. And this is causing a slightly different, this isn't just about the sense that we just left a team behind and everybody just wants to not worry about them. But think about DevOps, key sort of phrase in there, right? But how much of the ops part of DevOps is usually the focus? No, usually it's about giving developers unfettered access to everything, and everybody goes, no, you can't do that, it's not good. That's exactly it, yeah. Now every developer has to also be a Linux expert. Yeah. How many of you trust that if you're a Linux expert, right? So what's the guardrails? So, why now? Traditional ops workflow. Something happens. It's gone wrong. What went wrong? I don't know, but I get a ticket and alert. It tells me some random line of thing that it might be, well, this server's down, or this application's down. It doesn't actually tell me what's wrong at that point. It just tells me what the symptom of what's wrong is. And all the meanwhile, each one of those steps happens, and somebody gets told about it, and then somebody gets called out. Then we get a ticket created, and somebody has to evaluate that, and so you might have some things you can do. You might log onto the box. You might start poking around. You might just have to phone somebody up, right? You might have to get IT support involved. And eventually you respond. Now, if you are, obviously, if I ask this question now, I'm going to get a lot of hands. Who does on-call or who has done on-call at some point in their life, right? What was your SLA? An hour? Yeah? Right now. Thing is, it used to be 2 hours, right? Now it's 5 minutes, right? There's more pressure there on those sorts of things. But, all the while, this process is taking time, right? And it takes more time. And it continues to take more time. And I spoke to a customer yesterday and said, yeah, we have these crit sits, 6-hour sessions with 25 people on while we're all trying to figure out what's gone wrong. And in the meantime, they're trying to run an airline, right? You don't really want an outage for 6 hours away trying to run an airline. That's not a good thing. And it wasn't the one that you might be thinking of if you're in North America. So, all right. But the complexity is there. And this for me is the real reason why this comes in. We've got all these technologies. This is a simple example. And by the way, if you want to have a good example of what is a slide that's written by somebody who is marketing focused with skills and artistic flair, and then you want to get to a slide that's done by me, there we go. Yeah. So we've got some boxes with some words in. No, everybody got some of those, right? Yeah, maybe one or two. Everybody got some of those as well? Everybody tried one of them? How many have got multiple of them? Right? Yeah, exactly. See, we used to be great. I remember when I first started, we had a support team, we had a dev team, we had a testing team. And that was the linkage between the three. And the dev team would write stuff, and then we'd call them all idiots, and we'd support it. And then I'd change the code, test it, throw it back at them and say, that was the change that I've just made. So please put that back into your thing, because I used to work in the dev team before I worked in the support team. But it was great. We had traditional IT. We knew how those things worked. And then somebody thought, you know what's a great idea? Let's do cloud. Cloud's great. Cloud does DevOps. And everybody went, woohoo, DevOps. Right? We tried that. I said, well, I can do that with the network as well, can't I? Let's do NetOps. And you've got two different groups that already operated differently anyway. My old joke with them was I used to work in DNS, they used to work in numbers, no wonder we couldn't talk to each other, right? So you have that then. And then suddenly we go, well, actually, that cloud thing, I can't do cloud native, that's quite hard, right? I want to move some of my non-cloud native stuff to the cloud, so actually we just started doing data center outsource, sticking it onto the cloud. And it's traditional IT in the cloud now, just like data center extension. And then somebody thought at the same time, because they were trying to protect their fiefdom while everybody was going to the cloud and doing all the new fancy stuff, we should really have a good ITSM practice, right? We need service management. Because beforehand, it was just fine. We just talked to each other with the tickets. Now we need to have a whole structure that decides it. And somebody went on a load of courses, and they got some little letters after their name, and everybody's life was better. Surely? Better? No? Okay. And then we introduced all the others. And every time we did it, we added a few more bits and pieces, and we just took some of those systems out of one bucket and moved them into another bucket. And in the end, we ended up with 7 buckets with all these different combinations of ways that these things could work. Is our life any easier at this point? No. Right. And that's why I like ops as code. And this is the problem I'm seeing, and this is the problem I want to try and help you solve. In all of those things down this right-hand side, there is an ops responsibility, right? The question is, who has it? Is it a traditional dedicated team? Is it the responsibility of the app team that's running something in a 2-pizza team in a 12-man pod? Is it platform engineering that has to be able to give those operational capabilities in a self-service capability? Is it an SRE whose sole responsibility is to do that operational excellence, right? We think about IT/OT, we're going to start having more and more stuff move to the edge. How do we train people that have been used to mechanical engineering in how to do IT practices, right? And then I added the DevSecOps. But I actually had another animation that I couldn't make work, which basically just added them all on, the DevSec next something ops, and off you went, and everything was fine.
He tried to give my team a 1-hour SLA to make this slide.
Yes. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I spent an hour myself, you can tell. Right? So we end up in this situation where I think we have an opportunity to tackle this problem, right? Because we have, and this is where the subtlety comes in. One thing, DevOps has failed and succeeded, right? DevOps has succeeded for certain types of systems, it's succeeded in certain types of operating model in certain teams when you've got the right skills, when you've got the right impetus, the right desire. But then you still had this anchor of the other stuff, right, that was left behind. What it has done is shown the people that can, right? So a lot of those people that when the DevOps stuff happened, you started to think, oh yeah, we can make this change. And now I think back to my first days of working at a large bank, and I always wanted to do something differently. And all the guys that were senior, the chief somebody in the team would say, wow, you can't do that. It might go wrong. Well, it is going wrong all the time. That's why I want to change it, right? But wouldn't it if it could be better? Wouldn't that be a nice thing? Yeah, but no. Can't possibly do that because if it goes wrong, it's going to be harder for me to fix it rather than the 10 times you have to fix it, just harder the one time. I never understood the logic. So I've always liked this idea of being able to say, how do we educate those teams? But the thing is, you can't just sit there and expect an operations team to suddenly pick up all those things we talked about earlier. But all those things we mentioned earlier are starting to become more acceptable because DevOps has shown that there are better ways to make these things happen. Right? Even if it hasn't been perfectly successful, it has allowed us to see, you know what, we should have good APIs for our services. We should have good self-service capabilities. We should have good full end-to-end responsibility of what we're trying to achieve. If we go down the ops as code route, we have the ability to say we now have a consistent way to manage all of our operational capabilities across different teams. And that same sharing of knowledge, that same thinking as code as software developers, that same automation-first mindset is then something that permeates across all of those teams that are responsible for the management of the systems that are being built not just occasional teams and hoping they're good. It gives them a practice, it gives them a discipline that they can focus on. So this is where we're starting to see the market. And because the thing is, this is something that people are doing. We don't just, I mean, while I've had this in the back of my mind for many years, we don't just sit there and go, I think next week we'll try ops as code, right? This is based on observation, right? The conversations we have, what people want to be able to do. So moving from that day 0, day 1, think about efficiencies, skills gaps. Go back to that point. Every conversation I've been having here has been a variation of we can't get people to do this thing. And it might be because you can't hire enough people. It might be because they haven't got the experience. It might be because they're not interested, right? But it's always there. You have to find the right motivators. We are seeing that. But getting everyone to the side where we can start to standardize those processes, start to federate them out, will really make, starts to make a difference in how you can do more with what you have. The market has changed, and I mean the wider economic market, you may have noticed. Do you want to have a go? Or am I still?
Go.
I'm still on flow. So, think about ops as code. Automate the ongoing management. These are the benefits, by the way. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. It should have been on the top of the title. Benefits of those things. That ongoing management gets automated. Really important one, mean time to resolution. Can we shorten that, right? We talked about, in the roadmap session, we just talked about AI and its use. And the fact that it's the same pattern for, it took me 2 months. I mean, actually, if I go back to my world, it used to say it was 26 weeks to get a server built, right? So when we first started private cloud, 26 weeks of different teams having a process they passed off with each other with tickets, right? You get it down to a day. Whose fault is it? If it's self-service and everything takes a day, whose fault is it is wrong? It's the person who input the data, right? Or the automation's broken. If it takes 2 days, it's because you have to correct it. Takes 3 days, it's because you shouldn't be allowed near a computer, right? So you want to get to that point where you say, how do we shorten the mean time to resolution? Well, that's the same principle being applied to the process of the diagnosis of the problem. Can we take 15, 20, 30-minute chunks of time out of that process so that it takes less time to get back to a healthy state? And maybe eventually you do get to that point of having improved operational responsiveness. You do have the ability to sort of optimize that existing knowledge, and you maybe can get to the point where you do self-healing or auto-remediation, where the second that something goes wrong, you run an automation, it fixes it. But you still have to go through that process because you still have to take everything you know and put it down in some form so that the system can actually execute it. Now, why is this important for the transition to EDA? Why did we do event-driven Ansible? Well, for exactly this reason. People have been doing event-driven automation with Ansible, but you have to stitch it all together yourself. And the thing is, then you have to start thinking, well, actually, if I'm doing, Ansible itself is human-centric, right? Automation. I have a playbook, I write it. I want to run it across more than one host, 1,000 hosts. But I still kick that off myself. I still press a button and say, go and do that thing, and suddenly I've scaled myself massively. I no longer have to do that. In fact, you do that. I haven't written a playbook in years. But the point is that you suddenly have this ability to do something at a much greater scale rather than trying to have 100 different screens open and hoping that you don't press R-RF in the wrong directory and take down internet banking for a small European nation. True story. Right? I caught it halfway through, but it didn't help. Right? So I only deleted half of the server files under opt. Right? So we need to be able to observe those events, figure out where something is coming from. We need to be able to take a decision on what we want to do. We need to be able to evaluate what's going on. And then we need to be able to respond to that alert. Because that is the operational process. Go back to that thing earlier. We see what's happening, we get a ticket. How do we automate those steps and go through? And that's where EDA comes in, right? How do we sit there and integrate Ansible, the automation platform, into that observable intelligence system, right? How do we streamline those integrations, right? We did not make it easy to integrate Ansible into other systems. We made it easy to integrate Ansible to manage other systems, but not to integrate into other systems in the management ecosystem. When we've got down there, EDA does its thing, sees the sources, makes a decision, takes some action, and then you can automate it across all those things, right? This is the goal we're going for, making it easy for you to get, because we have to, Ansible already talks to all those systems on the right hand, your left, my right, right? It already talks to all of those. How do we give you more capability against that? Is it still me?
You can keep going.
Am I still going? Okay. Because I've forgotten what all the slides are when I put them together the other day. A keynote to do. The thing about the observation, right? Typical process. Third-party source of events comes in. So we use Dynatrace. We see this for any, I have two ways of looking at this. One is we have more complex event processing. You may already have other systems that do this and come together. You may get to that larger ecosystem of things going together, but not all the events are actually actionable automation events. We want to get that event sent through. We need to be a good actor in that ecosystem. That's why we have Kafka, that's why we have AMQ, there's those sorts of integrations, Prometheus, OpenShift API. But we also need to be able to talk to individual systems as well. We've got Dynatrace plugins, we've got the Dynamics plugins, Thousand Eyes, et cetera, all of those, just talking to those systems directly as they see something and push that off. Then we need to evaluate that, so we've integrated Drools, which is a DML that was inside Red Hat Decision Manager. We've integrated that in the back in an Ansible native fashion, so it looks like Ansible, right? But you're just talking rules language. But we've simplified what we're prepared to express, right? It's mostly like if this, then that type logic, correlative events, right? If A and B and C, do Y, yeah. If one, then do two, very simple, trying to keep it straightforward because this is just about those simple activities, those, the repetitive tasks we're trying to take out. And then we have to respond. Now, this is the fun bit. Everybody wants to go and think, whenever you think about previous solutions that have tried this, you think about the AIOps solutions. And we would go, who wants to turn an ML system loose on your infrastructure and give it a full unfettered access to every server to run any command it wants? Yay, good, yeah, one person, right, there you go. One maverick in the audience wants to have a crack at it. Now, the thing is, there's two problems there. One is you'll never get permission, right? And two, if you actually had a system that was bad enough that the ML could learn what was wrong, it isn't going to be the thing that helps you at that point in time. Something else is slightly broken, right? So you really want to have a situation where I have control over what I'm seeing. I can choose when I want to have those things come out. And I can choose which ones I'm looking for and build up as you go. And it's really about the cooperation then at that point. This is about moving away from human-centric automation to system-centric automation, right? Where the systems can talk to each other, right? And based on what you've permitted them to do, they can run some automation. I'm trying to remember, I've actually got another, oh no, I don't want to get to barbecue as code yet. Final point on this. When you're thinking through that process of what to do, it doesn't go straight to the remedial action. We use the word respond in this very specifically. A response could be run a discovery script. My application is down, run a network trace route. Fine, I've just saved myself 20 minutes, right? Go and inspect these log files. Pull that information back, stick it in a support ticket. Because in that 20 minutes, what was the SLA we agreed, we sort of talked about earlier? Half an hour, an hour? Well, in that time it takes you to turn up, because you might be out, might be the weekend. By the time you turn up, I've already done half the discovery for you, so you go, oh, yeah, it's that problem again. It's the same issue. What do I need to do? You can just run this other thing we've got. Run that, it'll fix it for you. Restart the service, bounce something, do whatever you need to do. Maybe after a point in time, you get to the point of saying, actually, we've seen this happen so many times now, we know the first thing we're going to do always is run that, and then we'll check again, and then if it's not fixed on the second time, then we'll raise the support ticket. Right, and do this other step, because we know we can take that preemptive measure. And eventually you might get to the point where you know how to remediate stuff and you've got a bunch of capabilities. So that's really important as we get into that larger sort of cooperation sort of space across those systems. How are we doing time-wise?
15 minutes.
15 minutes. I do want to do some questions this time, unlike last meeting. Sources, rules, and actions. I've already explained that. Don't need to do it again. Let's think about some use cases as well. We do see this as being a good example for drift. As nice as it would be that the only time you'd ever log onto a box would be through, through Ansible accessing that device, and therefore everything would be perfect, we know that is not the case, right? So drift is a good example. If something is slowing down, what would I like to do? There was a good, is Reza in the room? No, he's not. Right. So I can use his example, and I'm not giving credit. Talking to a customer this morning, they have Qualsys. sure some of you probably have that as well, does the security scanning. Yeah. It has a habit of triggering right at peak workload around massive shopping days and taking up half the firewall capacity while they're trying to have peaks. Happened on Black Friday. I'm sure they were very happy about that, right? When those sorts of things kick off. They have a whole event-driven process they've built, right? And actually, Reza was one of the ones that had the quote in the keynote. Event-driven process that kicks off and says, if the workload gets above a certain level, go and tell the Qualsys system to stop doing its security scans at this point in time and wait until later, right? So that it does not interfere with our ability to do business, right? So those are the sorts of things. So how do you help performance? The ticket enhancement. This is the good one. I can look at something. I can test something. I can pass that back up into ServiceNow, and then say, would you like to run this piece of automation? Yes, you've got the approval. The workflow can be added in. And from a user management, and this is a interesting one. So if you have a large enough organization, do you know how much it costs for all the L1 support tickets that you support? And usually the answer is no. You get a large bank. They implemented this in a non-EDA fashion. It's actually one of the places we got the idea from. $5 million a year in savings just off remediating user management issues, right, from their L1 tickets, not having to go to a person to solve that problem, both from a speed of fix, right, and a thing. And that's where you start to think, if you've got some of these problems that are big enough, that cost you enough time, there's a lot of money spent on those. And that's a lot of money you can spend doing more important things. Right. Final point. If I have not managed to convince you in anything we have said, right, that this is a good idea, let me introduce you to a barbecue as code. Anybody know what that is? Yeah, right. So I mentioned our bearded architect earlier, who you have seen, right? Of course, he has done this, right? He has a barbecue. He likes to smoke brisket. What happened there? Stall. What happened above on the blue line? The pit temperature was set higher. What triggered the pit temperature to be set higher? He's got an MQTT gateway with EDA connected to it. So basically, when it hits the stall, he puts more temperature in to push through the stall, right? I'm like, honest, I smoke, right, as well from a barbecue perspective. That's a pretty cool idea. I'd love to do that. I don't know how. So I might have to ask him to make one for me. But here's an example. Here's 2 briskets. Which one do you like the look of most? Left or right? Left, right. The left one's the one I did, right? And this is me teasing Matt, right? That's my brisket, yeah? That took me 12 hours. I live in the UK. The weather is not favorable for smoking from a barbecue perspective. It's windy, it's damp, it's cold. It can be nice at one moment, and then it rains on me. And that really doesn't do me a lot of good when I'm looking after the temperature of my barbecue, right? So I have to spend, when I do a barbecue and I do a brisket, I have to lose my Saturday, because I have to literally be within 30 yards of my smoker just in case something happens. And yeah, it looks nice. Matt's is on the right. I'd eat either, if I'm honest. I'm quite happy. I would be quite happy with either. But mine's the nice, manually managed, labor-intensive brisket, right? It is not that much better. Matt did it on a Thursday. We were having meetings while his barbecue was smoking that brisket, because he didn't have to do anything because he had it set up with EDA, right? Thing is, if I'm trying to manage 1,000 servers, do I need it to look like the left or I need it to look like the right? That's my point, right? We're doing this thing at scale. It's not about building the most perfect thing we can possibly do. It's about being able to produce consistent results and outputs with a minimum amount of effort. That's my analogy for barbecue as code. And there we go. All right. So who wants to ask some questions? We've got 5-10 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does it make, just though we're generally interested in this as if I sit down and talk to enterprise architects, they're always thinking about, and executives, they're always thinking about the operational challenges that you have. So we're generally interested in what you think about this. So here's a question. Yeah, so reporting, so in the sense of like what's been run, what's been activated, that sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah, I honestly think we haven't got to the point yet of adding that sort of capability in. One of the things that's in the next in the line, and this is something we've been talking to some of the observability partners about, is at the moment, if you trigger EDA, it says, hey, I triggered a job, and that job happened. It doesn't tell you what happened in that job. What I want to be able to get to is I ran that automation, and by the way, here's an event that comes back that tells me the actual result of that automation. Yes, the server is down or the application is down, and yes, you triggered an event and I did something. But actually what I did was restarted the server and cleared down the temp folder and then passed that back. And then those observability systems have that sort of AI/ML themselves for sort of correlating what the information and data is. So one of the first things we'll be thinking about from a reporting perspective is really more the passing the reporting back, not producing a big output report. But hadn't given that one much thought, so I will add that one into the mix. Yeah. Any more questions? Ooh. Two more. So I'll go for it first with the blue shirt.
A lot of the conferences focused on EDA and driven Ansible, which is spectacular. It's great to know that Ansible can be that engine, that full force engine. Is Red Hat going to spend time on Ansible scheduling engine? I mean, schedulers rare for complex workflows, robust workflows, and system requirements, branching logic, and do it. What if we want to run things at a schedule, or if our enterprise still wants it? It's not ready.
Yes. Yeah, and this is the thing. Some of those features, like the workflow, and I talked about briefly, we are looking at what we want to try and do with the workflow to enhance it, because the workflows are, the tricky part about the workflow in AAP is it's so heavily integrated into the job scheduling logic and algorithm that we can't just pull it out, because otherwise we won't be able to calculate certain things. But rudimentary is the word I use to describe our workflow. I think rudimentary is a fair word to describe our scheduling, because those things were added in to give the capability to those users that didn't have a larger scheduling system and a larger workflow system. If you've got either of those things, I would suggest you use them externally, an external scheduler. We're not going to be investing in a larger scheduling capability when most people have an external scheduler. The question would be is what can we do to make it easier to integrate into that scheduling system so that it's not as arduous for you? Right, that would be the question. Yeah. Okay. Possibly, yes. But the thing is, do we have the expertise to build one ourselves in the team? That would be my question. And the capacity, right? So anyway, there's another question there.
Strictly around EDA, and I'm thinking about self-healing AAP itself, like a watchdog service or something that would be on that machine, that would have a feedback loop to the EDA, that way in case AAP code or fail or something, that would be able to have a self-healing feature. Is that being considered?
Yes, yes is a simple answer. There's actually, with that other question you asked me earlier, I need to have you talk to the same person, right? Because he's been looking at this for a while. I am also trying to be very cautious that EDA is not the solution to every possible problem that we see, which is what some of our engineers want to do. It's like, we can just fix everything with EDA now. And okay, calm down, right? So we just need to make sure we do it through. But I think we've been thinking about using EDA for some of the auto-scale sort of capabilities, so I think it would extend naturally into that space. Yeah.
You have some pixie dust to use on operations teams.
So the question is, do I have any magic pixie dust to sprinkle on the operations teams that haven't seen the light yet? No, not yet, right? But I think what it is we're trying to sort of get to this point of trying to sort of like build this story, because I see consistently, the conversation is not about whether we want to do automation. The conversation is about getting everybody else to want to do automation, right? Who's seen the light and who hasn't. Now, at the moment, and this is where it gets interesting, and why this I think is relevant, is because we are having all these challenges. The thing is, this message is really aimed higher up the organization to say, you need to be driving these people. That's the way. Those people that will not see the light, they'll never see the light. And there's different reasons why they're in those roles or thinking about it. they're in a culture that doesn't embrace that change. So therefore, there's no input and stimulus. So we have to both be able to tackle them at the groundswell, but also at the top, coming down. This is why EDA is the technical piece that's how the engineers and the technicians would look at it. Ops as code needs to be that message that we can push down into those groups and say, look, there is a way for you to do this. Just telling them that something that does configuration management could also work over there doesn't correlate with, when we have your senior vice presidents of something come and have a conversation with us. When we start talking about this, that's what gets the attention, and that's the way we're trying to show the message, because this is not additive, right, to your cost base. This is additive to your ROI on AAP. It's already there. Now we're just adding this on top. We're just expanding what you can do. We're not asking for any additional money for this.
Well, and I will add that the work that we're doing with Ansible Lightspeed could help at least kind of bridge a gap that exists to help those teams get more comfortable with being able to build some of the skills that they just don't have, which is sometimes the inhibitor to some of those things. And so it's not magic pixie dust. And then I would also add, as you think about ops as code, in order to use a generative AI tool like Lightspeed with Watson Code Assistant, you actually have to have all of those operations documented in playbooks so that you can actually learn from them and to be able to build those best practices. And that's a message that goes both at an IC, an individual contributor level, all the way up to a leader who's trying to help deliver on those outcomes that come from all the work that you're doing.
And also think the automation for managing those systems doesn't necessarily need to be written by the operations team, right? It needs to be written by the subject matter experts. I mean, if you think about what ops would do, I mean, I remember, again, another example of taking down a critical banking service by saying, hey, shut down stack 4, and the guy shut down stack 5. And then we started getting the phone calls and the complaints for why we kicked 20,000 users off internet banking in the morning, right? So, there's the human element in there of who's the one who actually knows what the set of tasks are? Person that actually wrote the system. If they write the operational code so it can be executed, it's not the ops team that has to write it, but you're giving the ops team the codification. It's not here's a document with a whole lot of stuff that you can run, or here's an ops menu that only lets you do this one thing, but you have to be told what to do. No, here's the full sequence of events that we want you to actually listen out for. These are the things we're going to take off your plate. These are things we're going to give you and make you and be away from what you're involved in. So it's also a method for those other teams to pass that over to those other groups. Yeah. Question down here?
To the pixie dust factor, I see a lot of challenges where you just have people that are like mousy, clicky people, right? And they're like, ooh, code scary, right? But the labs that you guys have created, applaud to you, right? Like that stuff, you dumb it down enough, Macintosh
Yeah.
enough, so it's just so simple.
Yeah.
That it really kind of does take the fear out of
Yeah.
it. And I just would say, if you guys do more of that, it's the whole baseball,
Yeah.
if you build it,
Yeah.
right? This is, that's really key because I can give that to my peeps and say, try this
Yeah.
stuff.
And that's it.
That's here.
Lowering the barrier of entry is the biggest challenge most of the time. And it's that, I still remember 2013 going in, having a conversation about private cloud and saying, I need all of these services to have an API in front of them. Can't do that. It's like, and then he's like, well, you need to think like a developer. That same sentence. My engineers, not developers. And literally the manager slammed his fist on the table. Right? And I was like, all right. It wasn't really a request, but it was that thing of that. It's again that what's their motivation, what's their thinking process for it. Those examples of like the Instruct Labs, where you just make it super easy for them to realize it's like a software developer. It's not be a software developer. It's learn some of those practices, learn some of those capabilities. Oh, there's a load of Instruct Labs gone.
Yeah, so there's an entire page of a variety of Instruct Labs. It's an environment that you can go and interact with. I'll be honest, You know, I'm not a developer or an engineer. I get myself in pretty good trouble. But if you give me instructions, I can execute on whatever it is. I mean, I've installed the Visual Studio Code on my laptop, and I'm able to get a little bit of creating some chaos for folks like Rich. And so I agree with what you're saying is that if you give some folks some tools that are a safe playground, sometimes they're willing to investigate.
Well, there you go. There's your picture. If our head of marketing can do it, there you go. All right. Sorry.
It's all good.
But they write better slides than me, so they're just give and take, right?
Build more of them. That's going to be helpful.
Yeah. Yes. Takes time. Yeah. Anything else? Cool.
One of the things that we're trying to focus on is building our day two into our day zero and day one deployments, right? Kind of that think of like a developer, so that we're anticipating some of those actions and pre-deploying those.
Yeah. And that says there's a good thinking process, yeah.
Yeah, and then we're hoping that Red Hat comes on with a kind of templating idea to help us,
Yeah.
deploy those actions with
Yeah. Yeah. And again, those are the sorts of areas we're interested in looking at.
Yeah.
One final question, because I obviously appreciate where everyone wants to go to the next thing. So.
Tips for selling this to like infosec or management that are kind of shy about automation and starting things, doing things like that. Without being involved, to say, yes, do this.
So do it in that sequence of events I talked about, right? Don't just go straight to, hey, you could automate the whole lot, but you could say, do the discovery, right? Build that trust. Go to an approval process. We think we want to run this piece of automation based on what we've discovered and based on what the rules tell us. Would you like to run it? And then make somebody approve it. And then at a certain point in time, you go, that error came up X number of times, and we fixed it X number of times by running the automation that it said. You don't have to be an all-in-one-go process. You can build towards that. Take those steps, go on that journey, because this is all about trust, right? And the same separate, why people think that by putting people in the way, we actually sometimes make things more secure and better, right? But it makes them slower, as long as you've not got any human error. But if we can do it that way so that we can actually step through it and prove it, and then you can say, well, tell me why it shouldn't be turned on. We've just proved that we would have solved this many things, and find the right metrics, right, to sit there and say, I mean, there's the great metric one of my team has, and he said, you know, his company had 100,000 manual logons a month. Once they started automating, they got down to 5,000 manual logons a month. Well, that's something that security and InfoSec actually like people not doing. How do you want to stop manual logons to fix problems? Have it automated, then have it triggered, right? So build the automation, build the triggering, then connect the dots afterwards. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
right.
everyone.
That was useful. So.